Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this new edition of the BNI webinar. And this time we will look at PowerFacts Europe, which is one of the ENTSO-E publications using data from ENTSO-E and from the TSOs. I will introduce myself. My name is Claire Camus. I'm Communication Manager for ENTSO-E Secretariat. And I will be joined in today by Suzanne Nice, who is our Managing Director, and by Fabien Roch and Mathieu Guimenez, who are from FTI Compass Lexicon. So if you look at the agenda for today, if we can move to the next slide, after a short introduction on what PowerFacts is, I will give the floor to Suzanne, who will look at the July updates. And then we will move on to Fabien and Mathieu, who will tease another edition that we will do in November. And finally, we will look at questions and other comments you may have. So on the next slide, we're showing you how to ask questions. You can only do that in writing. You can do that during the presentations, and the presenter will try and answer them live. If not possible, we will look at them at the end of the webinar and take each question one by one. So next slide, please. If we look at what is the Business Network for Innovation, it's an initiative from the Research and Development Committee of ENTSO-E, and they wanted to bridge the TSOs and the world of startups, citizens initiatives, academics, and they created this Business Network for Innovation, which is actually gathering now more than 200 members. And concretely, we have series of webinars, and we will next year also probably organize luncheons where people can physically meet and exchange on the great innovation questions today in the electricity sector. So if we can start now with presenting what ENTSO-E PowerFacts Europe is. So if we look at what was PowerFacts so far, it was a report that was launched in January this year. And it was an initiative to gather all the data that ENTSO-E is producing and put it in one place so that it was more easily accessible. Today, what we will be looking at is a slight update of PowerFacts Europe with the latest data we have on certain data points, but not all, because some data are only updated every 2 years, other data are updated every year, but towards the end of the year. So this is why today there will only be a few data points that you will see can be updated. And in November, as you can see, we will not only celebrate 10 years of ENTSO-E, but we will also issue a new version of PowerFacts Europe. It will not be a report anymore, but a sort of slide deck with more in-depth updates and so forth, but that will be presented later on in this webinar. So just next slide, please. We can look at PowerFacts, what it is. It's a one-stop shop for TSO and ENTSO-E data. You've got on one side all the data sources that we use. So you see 60% of them are coming from ENTSO-E. And the 40 remaining % are coming from other authoritative data sources and are putting some of the data points into perspective. And it's as ENTSO-E and TSO do not gather data on all sorts of issues, but on certain specific ones we needed to complete with other sources. So if we move on to the next slide. What we wanted to do with PowerFacts as well is to put in the spotlight the fact that the usual energy trilemma, which is security of supply, affordability on markets, and sustainability, is not covering the whole power system transformation that we see today. So we wanted in PowerFacts to have facts and figures on 3 other dimensions. The infrastructure dimension, so why we need more power links or an updating extension of the current infrastructure to achieve the energy transition. We wanted also to put the consumer in the spotlight, giving some facts and figures on the latest consumer technologies. And finally, we wanted also to look at the cyber-physical dimension, so saying that it's only not about the physical infrastructure, but also about the digital layer that we need to come on top of it. So moving on to the next slide, please. I would like to give the floor now to Suzanne, who will kind of go back on the key messages of the January edition and also update the new one.
Many thanks, Claire. Welcome, everyone, and thanks that despite the summer season and the holiday break, you are joining us quite numerously. So please, the next slide on the update. This is the highlights from the January edition, in a way revisited and updated, where we had updates like on the statistical facts. And here, what is important to say is that the system is indeed in full transformation. The challenges are growing, as you are going to see on the next slides, but the TSOs are continuing to deliver in a more and more complex system of systems, as we also start to call this. First of all, of course, it's a no-brainer to see the growth in renewables from 2015 to 2018. We are at 35% of renewables in the electricity generation mix, not in the energy mix. In the energy mix, as you know, we try to get 20% in 2020, which is going to be achieved next year with some minor exemptions, most probably. But then we see that the electricity mix is still largely dominated by fossil and nuclear, and that we have some changes that are still quite limited. But with now the 2030 horizon, we know all that the electricity part is going to increase tremendously further and is going to reach something like 50% in the electricity mix, and can be revisited with the announcements that we hear now for more ambitious targets, the revision clause for the set 32% being in 2023. The next slide, please. And here, the impact of these variable renewables clearly is the increasing number of peaks. This slide shows by country of the ENTSO-E membership. You see here how the peaks in terms of upwards and downwards ramping in percentage of the overall situation, and you see a huge increase in these in the last years. This is a 2018, I guess, figure, no?
Yeah, this is.
Yeah. Next slide, please. And we also see in the 2018 the congestions are increasing. Congestions are limiting the opportunity for markets to operate, let's say, the system in a way, or to market parties to bid. We have seen the discussion on limited capacities cross-border, but you see on this slide as well a lot of limits within countries. In Germany, for example, the absence of the Südlink leads to a huge amount of congestions, especially in the western part of the country. And here we see, we have given the title of the slide, very limited number of serious incidents recorded on the grid. And you know that according to the incident classification scale, we have different, this is in line with the so-called system operation guideline that is, let's say, a network code part of the mandates of ENTSO-E. So here we have the classification that sees scale 0 as an anomaly in the system. Scale 1 is a noteworthy incident. Scale 2 is extensive incidents, and scale 3 is wide area incidents that typically goes beyond one single TSO. So when you look at what happened in 2018 in the grid, we see that we had a lot of these scale 0 anomaly frequency deviation type incidents in Germany. In 10 of June, we had some incidents of this scale, that we had much less incidents already on the scale 1, but still we shouldn't underestimate those, and a very limited amount of incidents on scale 2 that must have referred to the heat wave last year or the cold spells, I suppose. Yeah? So let's say that incidents are there, are closely monitored, are related to this variability paradigm, but are not in any dramatic sense to be observed. So on the Paris Agreement, we all understand, and NGOs and parties of all kinds understand more and more, that it's impossible to achieve the decarbonization, by the way, not only of energy, but also of transport, in the sense of ground transport, not plane transport, of course, without substantial grid investments. And according to a report that we have done on, say, the cost of no grid, we see a key role of infrastructure for climate change mitigation, where this minus 80% reduction in emissions is only achievable with substantial investments. A typical question related to such slides is then always, but did you also consider alternative solutions to grids? Aren't you, ENTSO-E, a lobby for more grids? Fact is that the TYNDP 2018 is considering alternatives to grid investment, like demand-side response or like storage, but still today those solutions are in infancy state, but they are part of our assessment, and we are not only advocating a single solution for improving the situation. We need the grids. You see this here as well, that the climate change mitigation, 35% of renewables up to 2040, a conservative estimate, having 60% of renewables in the electricity mix requires very clearly more grids to make this happen. We are very far from what you could imagine being a copper plate for electricity exchange across Europe. And here, this is the February 2018 study in which you have this so-called no action scenario, the study called ENTSO-E Power System 2040. And here, as we have insisted on, that we took into account storage and demand response potentials. But we understand that if we do not build the grid that is needed, we will waste more than 150 terawatt hours of clean electricity and increase also the risks of security of supply. And we also, according to our modeling, we came to the conclusion that year by year, Europeans will have to pay 40 billion euros as of 2040 if we fail to deliver on the needed grids. So in the Power Facts, the update, what is new since January? And this is now a little bit the update that we could operate ahead of the more substantial revamp that we can envisage, thanks also to the support of FTI Compass Lexicon that is participating in today's webinar. So since January, we have new data on the share of renewables in electricity generation, and we also have the new numbers on ENTSO-E transparency platform that is much more used. So concerning the share of renewables in the electricity generation, we see that between 2017, our reference year for the January first edition of Power Facts, we see that 19 extra gigawatts of wind and solar have been integrated. But this is about 25% less than the ramp up between 2016 and 2017, where there was even more a radical expansion with 25 gigawatts at that time. Then on the electricity generation side, on the electricity generation side, we see that the fossil fuel in net electricity generation has decreased by 2%, while renewables have increased by the same amount between 2017 and 2018. We all understand that this is not sufficient for meeting the COP21 ambition, but it's a step. Let me also update you on what we call the Cyberphysical grid. There will be an ENTSO-E paper out in October portraying this digitalization of the power system, while not stating this system in the future is going to be existing without the physical assets that will be always needed. As I said, we are far away from anything such as a copper plate for electricity exchange. So the updates are as follows. We see on the transparency platform that is set to become ENTSO-E's single data platform that is crucial for delivering several of the mandates around system operations, around the market operation that is used by a huge amount of parties for participating in the market day by day. So we see here the registered users have increased between 2016, that was 1 year after TP was launched in line with the transparency regulation. We see here an increase to 16,700 day by day mid of 2019. And also we are proud to say that the quality of the data and the completeness of the data have tremendously changed since the inception of the TP. The Cyberphysical grid, here you see it again, these numbers of the steady increase of the registered users of this platform. You see also parties like Wind Europe or a startup like Tomorrow using those data to analyze, to project, for example, what is the current CO2 mix in Europe by country, or for Wind Europe to show the real-time generation of wind by European member states. We also progress in the area of the innovation projects. Everyone is aware and knows from, say, the Gardner hype cycle, or for example, the perception that we see via the World Energy Council overview, the so-called issues monitor on breakthrough technologies. We all understand that technologies are crucial in ENTSO-E, and the TSO community are more and more involved in research projects directly. One of the major projects is so-called Interface, with 2 R, by the way. And this project looks into the digital side of things, the interoperable digital platforms that are needed to do justice to the customer that is enforced with the Clean Energy Package, and looks into TSO and DSO interaction. We have a small team now in ENTSO-E, and Laurent, who is in charge of the business network, is part of this very good team that is delivering this project Interface with more than 60 parties from all kinds participating in delivering it. And here, of course, in these interface projects, we are, just to conclude here, we try to connect this to things that ENTSO-E has to do on areas such as cybersecurity, on areas such as transparency platform, and of course the CGM, the common grid model, that is today already standing for 1/3 of ENTSO-E activities and of its budget. So I'm very happy to pass on the floor now to Fabien Roch and Mathieu Jimenez from Compass Sexton, and that are going to explain to us what revamp we are going for the November edition in line with ENTSO-E's 10-year celebrations.
Thank you, Suzanne. This is Fabien. Very happy to be collaborating with ENTSO-E on the November edition of PowerFacts. So what you can see on this slide is the core chapters under consideration for the next edition. we will keep what is the recipe of success for PowerFax. So we will have the three main areas covered: security of supply, market integration, and grid development. But we will try and expand and develop further some of the key indicators. So if I take a few examples on the security of supply side, you know that it's important to look at the role of TSOs in day-to-day operation. There's been a bit of focus earlier this year on frequency deviations, so we will cover that. Secondly, on the adequacy, as part of the clean energy package, TSOs have a mandate to come up with a number of methodologies and forecasts. So there again, we will update on the latest developments. And finally, a growing issue is flexibility. And a number of TSOs on ENTSO-E are developing an outlook for flexibility needs, including ramping, balancing, etc. So this is what we plan to cover under the first issue, security of supply. Second one, market integration. Obviously, the usual suspects will be covered: progress of market coupling, the growth of exchange volumes, the flows, price convergence. But we will focus more on interconnection available and the network codes implementation, their status, and the value they create for the European energy markets. Finally, grid development, infrastructure, that's the key backbone of the energy transition in Europe. We will look at the investments. We will look at the role, as I said, of power lines in climate change mitigation, at the PCIs, project of common interest, and some of the innovative projects. So the role of DC cables, the role of offshore platforms, connecting offshore wind. And finally, we will also look at some of the regulatory issues, including tariffs, transmission tariffs. So this is a bit of a snapshot, an overview, but we also welcome suggestions, and this webinar can be an occasion for you to make suggestions as well as to what you'd like to see covered. A final point I'd like to raise, and this is the next slide, and I'll pass on to my colleague Mathieu, is that we want to do a couple of special focuses. We are still debating within ENTSO-E what is most relevant, but we have a few candidates here, and I'll let Mathieu talk you through these three candidates.
So the first candidate is the cooperation between TSOs and DSOs. This is a very trendy topic because TSOs and DSOs are collaborating more and more to build the power system of tomorrow. In many aspects of the power system, like the asset aggregation, data exchange, flexibility, of course, and grid solutions. So this will be particularly important because this year, in April, ENTSO-E, TSOs and DSOs have published a report to propose an integrated approach to active system management. So the idea of this spotlight is to shed the light on this new approach which was proposed by the TSOs and DSOs. The next trendy topic that we would like to highlight in this new version is research and innovation, because research and innovation has become a key part of TSOs but also DSOs work, and it will be key to address the challenges of the next decade. So it will cover power system modernization, security and system stability, power system flexibility, the questions of economics and efficiency, and of course digitalization. This we think should be based on the report that was published by ENTSO-E in April of this year on the monitoring of research, development, and innovation projects. So this will be the occasion to shed the light on this work. And finally, the last key issues for the coming decades is maybe the cyber-physical grids, with the development of this digitalization and more connected assets and grids. So we'll focus on physical grids, on data, on system operation, on markets, and of course on the issue of sector coupling. So about this topic, ENTSO-E is currently building a report on the cyber-physical grids, which should be published by the end of the year. So we plan to highlight the key messages and key issues that are going to be highlighted by this report to be published. So that's for the snapshot that we are considering.
All right.
Maybe it's yeah, you take over.
Yeah, I will take over, but after the echo is off.
Sorry for an echo.
We just have an echo problem. Okay, so it's yeah. All right. Okay, so now we continue. So we can move on to the next slide. To conclude, I would like to just alert you to the fact that we've got a couple of events coming up. One of them is in Copenhagen. It will be on the regional coordination of TSOs. It's the Regional Security Coordinator Conference 2019. It's organized with the Nordic RSC this time. Last year it was with Coreso. And another big event, of course, is our ENTSO-E 10-year conference on the 13th of November in Finland. We will be there not purely celebrating the 10-year ENTSO-E, but really taking stock of what the TSOs have done through ENTSO-E in the last 10 years, what has been achieved, and also on this basis look at what is coming up with the clean energy package and beyond. Just to go back to some of the questions that you have been asking us, there was some clarification to be done on the whether what part of hydro and is renewable and what is not, because we make the distinction. So maybe Suzanne, you wanted to explain.
Yes, so many thanks. This is a question that comes back indeed very often on why is hydro exempted here. And just to explain a little, in the Renewables Directive of 2009, the third package, there was a clear definition on what is renewables and what not. By the way, also hydro at large has been exempted here. It was related to biomass, to wind, to solar, and geothermal, the new, let's say, renewables. But indeed, pumped hydro is in that sense specific, that it is energy after energy, and that it can be the pumping of the water wastes also a lot of energy, but it's still a no-brainer, as it is the most cost competitive storage large scale today, and that is based on a surplus of electricity in the system at certain moments in time. So it can be, of course, stemming from fossil fuel generated electricity as much as renewables electricity. So all depends on what it is. And Claire's right in her response that it can't be considered renewable in any case when fossil fuels have been the generation source for pumping up the water. But as I said, it can be all kinds of sources. It doesn't matter anymore if the electron is black, green, gray, or yellow. We have another question that is maybe also interesting to consider here. The slide that we have on congestions, yeah, and there was a question: would nodal pricing solve the problem? And I would like to have also Fabien react to this. It's an interesting and important question. Yeah, is market design the solution for congestion? Yeah? My response would be that it's not one single solution like nodal pricing or capacity mechanisms that are going to solve this in a one shot. There is certainly a need for several elements to solve it. The clean energy package, for example, adds dynamic pricing as to get customer more reactive to, let's say, peaks in demand and supply, and participate more actively in these things. Definitely also the so-called the target model, which sees the bidding zones improved, etc., is not has not seen the end of its logic. There are certainly ways to improve further on with this current logic, and as we try to say as well, is that infrastructure is definitely an important part of the solutions here as well. But maybe Fabien, you want to complete on this question?
Yes, happy to add a few things, Suzanne. So I think you're completely right that to deal with congestion, you have structural remedies which have to do with the infrastructure. And you also have then the question of how you optimize the use of these infrastructures, which is the market design. But a good market design cannot be a substitute for not having enough infrastructure in the first place. So that is the first point to be made. I completely agree with you. Then more specifically on nodal pricing, I think we need to be very careful about what we are talking about when we discuss nodal pricing. If you look at the experience in the US with nodal pricing, the idea is a good one. It's the idea that you can co-optimize the constraints on the network and the markets. But in practice, it's quite challenging to implement. And what the US have done is essentially optimizing networks and markets based on the day ahead. So if you look at the world of tomorrow and the power system of tomorrow, where we have a need for real-time optimization based on the growth of renewables, I think we need to think carefully whether nodal pricing, where the optimization is based on the day ahead, is the right thing to do. And if people want to move to real-time nodal pricing, well, that is not done anywhere in the world, and this is raising computational and practical challenges, which are very hard to solve seen from today. So that is my one penny contribution to the discussion, Suzanne, on this complex issue of nodal pricing.
There was another question maybe for you, Fabien, with regards to your slide on the kind of focus point on TSO, DSO cooperation, about what one bullet point says grid solutions. What would be covered by that?
What we would like to highlight is that it's key in the future to develop that TSO and DSO develop together the grids. It's already the case, but it will become more and more essential as you have more and more decentralized energy source in the system. So the idea is to develop common grid solutions to address common issues like flexibility issues on both the transmission and distribution grids. So that's the idea of this topic.
Yeah. And this is maybe to add to this point, I think it's extremely important what you said. We are still looking at the system in silos. It's the main problem. There's also the Commission intending next year to have not anymore a gas package, a decarbonization package, as to overcome a logic that is always isolating elements, be it gas and power, or be it in the case that we have here, the grid solutions, the transmission and distribution. They should be seen together and optimized together and provide common grid solutions.
So there's one more question. So yes, there is one question whether we want to publish something on flexibility.
I'm not aware of a report that we are going to publish on flexibility, but we will come up for the November ENTSO-E 10 years annual conference with Vision 2030 on operations and markets, and indeed flexibility forms part of that exercise. And you can also see in the work of the research committee of ENTSO-E and the related publications, be it the Cyberphysical grid references to flexibility, and last but not least, of course,
How do you operate prosumer clearing market? I'm not quite sure that the question is very precise here.
I don't honestly understand the concept. What
Yeah.
is a prosumer clearing market? Fabian, does this ring a bell to you? Fabian?
So I can, yes, sorry, I was on mute. So on this, I mean, I would like to step back and say that there are a number of definitions of local markets. People talk about local markets for local communities. People talk about local flexibility platforms. And I think the first thing to do here is to explain that there could be very different types of local trading platforms or markets depending on different needs. Sometimes the need is congestion. Sometimes the need is just a wish to have a local consumption or the need for some specific services in a specific place. So the first thing is to, I think, disentangle the different types of local platforms of market. That's the first element of an answer, if you want. The second thing is that if there is interest in that, this is definitely an area where we could provide, subject to agreeing with ENTSO-E colleagues, a bit more details in the November edition, because indeed there are a number of initiatives where TSOs are actually engaged in local platforms for flexibility together with DSOs and new players. So if there is interest, we would be, of course, happy to expand on that in the next edition.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a very good idea. We need to discuss this. Currently, let's say the ENTSO-E statement is always that customers need to participate in all markets, and there is one big market. Yeah, so it's not very, let's say, this idea of having isolated markets other than in isolated areas like islands, maybe, or in remote areas, is not something that we believe is very efficient at this point in time. But I think it's worth to discuss it and to see if we can include something on this important discussion in an update of the power facts and to portray. Yeah. Okay.
I think we don't have any more questions. I'm looking at one additional information that we'd like to give you is that the Business Network for Innovation events are continuing. So we've got a number of topics in the pipeline: sector coupling, blockchain, the flexibility, digitization, and we are working on a more precise topic webinar for September. So keep up to date on our Twitter account or our LinkedIn account to make sure to register for the next one. If we don't have any more questions, I would like to thank very much Suzanne, Fabien, and Mathieu and Laurent, my colleague, for supporting us and answering your questions and presenting today. I wish you a very lovely summer, and I hope to have you at our next webinar, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.